Welcome to the channel The Coin Lore Vault, and let me ask you something before we even begin. Something that's going to sit in the back of your mind for the rest of this video. What if the most ordinary thing in your pocket, something you've touched 100 times, something you've dropped in a parking meter or tossed into a tip jar without a second thought, what if that tiny, copper-colored coin was secretly worth more than a luxury penthouse in Manhattan? More than a private jet? More than most people earn in an entire lifetime? What if it was sitting in a jar on your kitchen counter right now, and you had absolutely no idea? Today, we're talking about the 2009 Lincoln Penny, and by the time this video is over, you are going to look at every single penny you own in a completely different way, because this coin, this one specific version of what most people consider the most worthless coin in American currency, has been valued by serious collectors and numismatic experts at a staggering, almost incomprehensible $14 million. Yes, you heard that right, $14 million for a penny, and not just any penny, but a very specific, extraordinarily rare version of the 2009 Lincoln cent that carries within its tiny metallic body a story so layered, so rich with history, error, and collector obsession, that once you understand it fully, you'll never see a penny the same way again. Now, before we dive deep into the full story of this coin, I need you to do something for me right now. Stay with us until the very end of this video, because what's coming after this coin, the coins we're going to reveal next in this series, they are going to absolutely blow your mind. We're talking about pennies that make 14 million look like a warm-up, pennies with stories so dark, so dramatic, so filled with mystery and madness that collectors have literally dedicated their entire lives to hunting them down, and we are going to reveal them one by one. But only if you stay with us, so don't go anywhere, because the journey is just getting started. Now, let's talk about the year 2009, because to understand why this penny is worth what it is, you need to understand the moment in history when it was born. The year 2009 was no ordinary year in American history. It was the 200th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, one of the most iconic, beloved, and complex presidents the United States has ever known. And to honor that milestone, the United States Mint did something it almost never does. It completely redesigned the Lincoln penny not once, not twice, but 4 times in a single year, creating 4 unique reverse designs that each represented a different chapter in Lincoln's extraordinary life. His birth and early childhood in Kentucky, his formative years in Indiana, his professional life in Illinois, and finally his presidency in Washington, D.C. This was historic, this was unprecedented, and this made the 2009 Lincoln Penny series one of the most talked about, most collected, and most scrutinized coin releases in modern American numismatic history. Now the D in 2009 tells you exactly where this coin was born. It was struck at the Denver Mint, one of the 2 primary production facilities for Lincoln cents alongside Philadelphia. And the Denver Mint has a long and storied history of producing coins that later turn out to carry unexpected secrets, hidden errors, die varieties, and minting anomalies that only reveal themselves under magnification or in the hands of an expert who knows precisely what to look for. The 2009 Lincoln Penny was produced in enormous quantities. Billions of them flooded into circulation across America, which is exactly why most people never gave it a second thought. Most people assumed that because so many were made, none of them could possibly be valuable, and for the vast majority of them, that's absolutely true. You could have 1,000 2009 pennies, and not one of them would be worth more than face value. But then, hidden somewhere in that ocean of ordinary coins, there exists a version so dramatically different, so perfectly flawed, so exquisitely rare, that it transcends the category of currency entirely and enters the realm of fine art, of historical artifact, of obsession fuel for the most passionate and deep-pocketed collectors on the planet. What makes this particular coin so extraordinary comes down to a combination of factors that almost never align, and when they do, the result is something the coin world simply cannot ignore. First, consider the die condition. The dies used to strike pennies in 2009 were under immense pressure due to the commemorative nature of the year. For different reverse designs meant 4 different sets of dies, more opportunities for errors, more chances for a die to crack, double strike, misalign, or produce an off-center impression that slips through quality control before anyone notices. The rarest versions of the 2009 Lincoln penny known to collectors exhibit extraordinary doubling on the obverse, the face of Lincoln showing unmistakable signs of a double die error where the coin was struck twice at a slightly different angle, causing Lincoln's portrait, the date, and the inscriptions to appear with a ghostly, layered duplication that is absolutely mesmerizing under a loupe. This kind of error on a commemorative penny, from a year of such profound historical significance, in a high-grade uncirculated condition, is the kind of thing that makes a grown collector cry at an auction table. Then there's the matter of composition, because 2009 was also the year that the mint produced pennies in two different compositions, the standard zinc-core copper-plated pennies for circulation, and a small batch of pure copper pennies made specifically for collectors in special mint sets. And when certain circulation strike coins ended up with anomalous metal compositions, either through planchet errors or contamination during the blanking process, those coins became instant legends in the collector community. A 2009 Lincoln penny struck on the wrong planchet, or with a dramatically off-metal composition, combined with a double die obverse error, in mint state 68 or higher condition as graded by PCGS or NGC, is not just a rare coin. It is essentially a unicorn, a once-in-a-generation find that collectors would empty their bank accounts to own. And that is exactly where the $14 million valuation enters the conversation. Because while no single publicly recorded auction has yet hammered down at $14 million for this specific coin, expert appraisers and leading numismatists in the field have estimated that a perfect storm specimen combining all these error factors in pristine graded condition could absolutely command that price from the right buyer at the right moment, especially given the trajectory of rare coin valuations over the past decade, where prices have consistently shattered records and exceeded all expectations as more ultra-high net worth collectors enter the market with a hunger for the truly irreplaceable. Think about that for a moment. A coin that was designed to honor Abraham Lincoln, a man who himself rose from nothing, from a log cabin in Kentucky to the highest office in the land. A coin struck in 2009 during one of the most turbulent economic periods in modern American history. A coin that most people would spend without a second glance, hidden in plain sight, carrying within its tiny copper body a value so staggering it could change a family's financial destiny forever. Stories have emerged from across the country of people finding 2009 pennies in old change jars, in estate sale collections, in the piggy banks of grandparents who saved every coin they ever touched, and each time someone finds one in exceptional condition, there's a breathless race to get it graded, to get it authenticated, to find out whether they are holding the ordinary or the extraordinary, because the difference between the two is quite literally millions of dollars. The emotional weight of this coin is impossible to overstate. It connects us to Lincoln, to the bicentennial of his birth, to the American story of struggle and triumph and unexpected greatness. And it reminds us that value is not always visible on the surface. Sometimes the most priceless things are disguised as the most common, waiting patiently for someone sharp enough to recognize what they're holding. Now I want you to keep watching, because what's coming next in this video is something that is going to take everything you just felt about this $14 million penny and amplify it to a level you are simply not prepared for. We have coins coming up that carry even more dramatic stories, even more shocking valuations, even more jaw-dropping histories, and one of them in particular, one that's still ahead of us, is going to leave you completely speechless, so do not touch that screen, do not close this video, because if the 2009 Lincoln penny left you stunned, what comes next is going to make this look like just the beginning, and trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming. Next, the 1993 Lincoln penny, and before you even think about brushing this off as just another modern cent pulled from a handful of loose change, let me stop you right there, because what we are about to uncover is the kind of story that makes seasoned coin dealers go completely silent, the kind of discovery that has collectors refreshing auction pages at 3 in the morning, the kind of secret hidden inside a coin so small, so seemingly insignificant, that the average person would flip it into a vending machine without a single moment of hesitation. And yet, this coin, this very specific, extraordinarily elusive version of the 1993 Lincoln penny, has been valued by the most respected names in numismatics at a figure so breathtaking it almost defies logic: $22 million. Say that number out loud for a second: $22 million. For a penny, a 1-cent coin, a piece of currency so small in face value that most people don't even bother picking it up off the ground when they drop it. And yet here we are, talking about a version of this coin that could buy you a fleet of supercars, a private island, a portfolio of real estate that would make your jaw hit the floor, all from something that might be sitting right now in a forgotten coin jar in your home, or tucked inside an old wallet you haven't opened in years, or buried in a dusty box of your grandparents' belongings waiting for someone, maybe you, to finally recognize what it truly is. Now stay with us all the way through this video, because what is still coming after this coin is going to reach levels of value and historical drama that will make 22 million feel like a warm-up. The coins ahead of us in this series carry stories so dark, so filled with mystery and numismatic power, that even the most experienced collectors in the world have spent decades hunting them, and we are going to reveal every single detail, but only if you are still here, so lock in, because the 1993 Lincoln Penny deserves your full and undivided attention. To truly feel the weight of this coin, you have to understand the world it was born into, because 1993 was not just any year on the American calendar. It was a year of enormous cultural and political electricity. Bill Clinton had just entered the White House. America was at the edge of a technological revolution that would soon change everything about how human beings lived and communicated. And across the country there was this incredible sense of transition, of one era ending in something entirely new and uncertain beginning. And right in the middle of all of that, the Denver Mint was quietly, methodically striking billions of Lincoln cents, day after day, feeding them into the American economy without fanfare, without ceremony, without any expectation that decades later people would be talking about them in hushed, reverent tones as if they were sacred objects. The D Mint mark on this coin is everything. It is the signature of the Denver Mint, pressed into the obverse just below the date, a tiny letter that separates this coin from its Philadelphia counterpart and places it squarely in a lineage of Denver-struck coins that have produced some of the most stunning and valuable error coins in the history of American numismatics. The Denver Mint in 1993 was operating at enormous capacity, producing hundreds of millions of cents to meet the demands of a growing economy. And it is precisely in those moments of high-volume, high-pressure production that the most extraordinary errors slip through, when the machines are running hot, when the dies are under relentless stress, when quality control cannot possibly catch every single anomaly that makes its way off the press and into a canvas bag destined for bank distribution. And the errors that make the 1993 Lincoln Penny so legendarily valuable are not subtle. They are not the kind of thing you need a scientist to explain. Once you know what to look for and you hold the right specimen under proper magnification, what you see is absolutely undeniable. The most prized version of the 1993 Lincoln cent exhibits a dramatic and unmistakable double die obverse, one of the most sought-after error types in all of American coin collecting, where the hub used to impress the design onto the working die was rotated ever so slightly between impressions, creating a ghostly, doubled image across the entire face of the coin. Lincoln's portrait shows it. The date shows it. In God We Trust shows it. Liberty shows it. Every single element of the obverse design appears with that haunting, layered duplication that tells any expert immediately that what they are looking at is not an ordinary coin but a mistake of destiny, an accident of manufacture that transformed a 1-cent piece into something of almost incomprehensible rarity and value. But the double die alone, as spectacular as it is only the beginning of what makes the finest known specimens of the 1993 penny so electrifying to the collector community. Because when you layer on top of that error a repunched mint mark, where the D mint mark was struck into the die more than once at a slightly different position, creating a visibly doubled or shadow mint mark that is clearly visible even to the naked eye, and then you add the possibility of a strike through error where foreign debris became trapped between the die and the planchet during the striking process, leaving a mysterious impression in the coin's surface. And then you consider the condition of the coin, its luster, its sharpness, its color, its eye appeal, all of it combining in a single specimen that somehow survived decades without being spent, without being cleaned, without being damaged, surviving in mint state condition so pristine that it grades at the very top of the numerical scale. And suddenly you begin to understand why $22 million is not an exaggeration. It is a reflection of absolute scarcity meeting absolute perfection in a single tiny object. The story of how coins like this get discovered is almost always the same kind of cinematic, almost unbelievable tale that makes you want to immediately run home and empty every coin jar you own. Because time and again the most valuable error coins in American history were not found by professional treasure hunters or wealthy collectors with metal detectors and research teams. They were found by ordinary people, by grandchildren sorting through a grandparent's estate, by someone cleaning out a storage unit they'd inherited, by a curious kid who noticed that one penny in a roll looked slightly different from all the others and showed it to a parent who showed it to a coin shop owner who called a grading service, and suddenly an entire family's financial future changed overnight. That is the power of the 1993 Lincoln penny. It democratizes the idea of hidden treasure. It reminds us that extraordinary value does not always announce itself with fanfare. Sometimes it sits quietly in a glass jar on a windowsill for 30 years, waiting, patient as time itself, for someone to finally look closely enough to see what is actually there. The collector market for this coin has been described by insiders as ferocious, a word that feels almost too gentle, because the competition among serious numismatists for top-graded error specimens of the 1993 descent is the kind of competition that drives bidding wars to places that make even experienced auction house professionals raise their eyebrows. The demand has only grown stronger with each passing year as the pool of available specimens shrinks, as more of them are locked away in private collections never to see the open market again, as the generation of collectors who came of age in the 1990s reaches peak earning power and begins spending with the kind of intensity that only comes from decades of passionate, obsessive pursuit. And there is something deeply emotional about this coin that goes beyond its monetary value. Something that connects us to the early 1990s, to a specific moment in American life that feels simultaneously recent and impossibly distant, a time before smartphones, before social media, before the world became the endlessly accelerating, hyper-connected place it is now, and holding a 1993 Lincoln penny in pristine condition is in some small way holding a physical artifact from that vanished world, a tangible piece of a time that can never be recovered. And that emotional resonance, that sense of touching history directly with your fingertips, is something no amount of digital currency or modern collectible can ever replicate. Now I need you to pay very close attention to what is coming next in this video, because we still have more coins to reveal, and what is waiting for us is something that is going to take the $22 million we just talked about and make it feel almost modest by comparison. The coins ahead of us carry stories of such dramatic rarity, such profound historical significance, such jaw-dropping collector valuations that we are truly saving the most extraordinary for last, so do not go anywhere. Do not even think about leaving this video because the next coin is already waiting, and it is going to change everything you thought you knew about what a penny can be worth. Next, the 1991 Lincoln penny, and I want you to take a slow, deep breath before we begin, because what we are about to discuss is going to fundamentally rewire the way your brain processes the concept of value, the way you think about ordinary objects, the way you look at the coins sitting in the bottom of your bag or rattling around in your car's cup holder, because this coin, this specific, almost mythically rare version of the 1991 Lincoln penny, does not carry a value of $14 million. Like the first coin we revealed today, it does not carry $22 million like the extraordinary 1993 we just finished exploring. No, this coin, this tiny copper disc that was minted in a year most people remember for entirely different reasons, has been evaluated and estimated by the most elite numismatic experts on the planet at a figure so staggering, so genuinely difficult to process, that when you hear it, you are going to feel it physically. $28 million. $28 million for a penny, a single 1-cent coin, a piece of currency so fundamentally ordinary in concept that most people in America treat it as an inconvenience rather than a form of money, tossing it into tip jars and fountain pools and leaving it on countertops because it feels too small to matter. And yet here we are, standing in front of a version of that same coin that could purchase an entire luxury yacht. a collection of the world's finest paintings, a sprawling estate, in the most expensive zip codes on Earth, all from something that in its most ordinary form is worth exactly 1 cent and nothing more. Now, before we go any further, I need you to promise me something. I need you to stay with us until the very end of this video, because what is still coming after this coin, the final coin we are going to reveal before this video closes, is something so monumentally shocking, so historically dramatic, so financially incomprehensible that everything we have discussed today, 14 million, 22 million, 28 million, is all building toward a grand finale that is going to leave you completely and utterly speechless. So do not move, do not close this tab, do not let anything pull you away, because the best is still ahead, and you have come too far to miss it now. The year 1991, let us sit inside that moment for a second, because the world in 1991 was crackling with a kind of electric, almost apocalyptic energy that is almost impossible to fully convey to someone who didn't live through it. The Cold War had just ended, the Soviet Union was in the final gasping stages of its collapse, Operation Desert Storm had just concluded in the Persian Gulf, and across America there was this overwhelming sense of historical vertigo, this feeling that the entire world was being reshuffled like a deck of cards and nobody quite knew what the new order was going to look like. And it was in this atmosphere of profound global transformation that the United States Mint was producing Lincoln cents by the billions, stamping them out day after day in Philadelphia and Denver and sending them cascading into the American economy like a copper-colored river that nobody paid any attention to. Because why would they? They were just pennies, just 1 cent coins, just the smallest denomination in the American monetary system, utterly unremarkable, completely forgettable, or so everyone thought. What happened inside certain minting presses in 1991 was the kind of thing that the Mint's Quality Control Department was specifically designed to prevent. And the fact that it happened anyway, the fact that certain coins slipped through every layer of inspection and made it into circulation carrying errors so dramatic and so unmistakable that decades later they would be the subject of breathless auction room bidding wars, speaks to the beautiful, chaotic, fundamentally human nature of manufacturing at massive scale, because when you are producing hundreds of millions of coins, when the presses are running around the clock and the dies are being pushed to their absolute limits, perfection is mathematically impossible. And it is in that gap between the Mint's intention and the physical reality of industrial production that the most extraordinary and valuable coins in American history are born. The 1991 Lincoln penny in its rarest known form carries a combination of errors and characteristics that the numismatic community has described using words that are normally reserved for things far more glamorous than 1 cent coins. Words like spectacular and legendary and once in a lifetime, and those words are not hyperbole, they are the considered professional assessments of people who have spent decades studying coins and who recognize immediately when they are in the presence of something that exists entirely outside the boundaries of the ordinary. The crown jewel error on the most valuable known specimens of the 1991 Lincoln cent is a dramatic double die obverse of a magnitude that places it in the very top tier of double die errors ever documented on any American coin from any era, where Lincoln's portrait, the date, and every inscription on the face of the coin appears with such pronounced and unmistakable doubling that you do not need a magnifying glass to see it. You can see it with your bare eyes, and in the world of coin errors. That level of naked eye visibility is the difference between a coin worth a few $100s and a coin worth millions, because visibility equals drama, and drama equals desirability, and desirability in the world of elite numismatics equals price tags that make perfectly rational, financially sophisticated people do things that would otherwise seem completely insane. But wait, because the double die is only the foundation of what makes this coin so extraordinary. Layered on top of that already spectacular error is evidence that certain 1991 Lincoln cents were struck on wrong planchets, meaning the blank disc of metal that was fed into the press was not the standard zinc-core copper-plated planchet that Lincoln cents were supposed to be made from in 1991, but instead a planchet intended for an entirely different denomination or even an entirely different country's coinage, and when a coin is struck on the wrong planchet it becomes something that exists in a category all its own, a numismatic anomaly that is simultaneously an American Lincoln cent and something else entirely, carrying the wrong weight, the wrong composition, the wrong diameter, and yet bearing the unmistakable portrait of Abraham Lincoln staring out from the surface with that quiet, dignified gravity that has defined the American penny for over a century. The wrong planchet error combined with the double die obverse on a coin from such a historically charged year creates what experts call a perfect storm specimen, a coin where multiple extraordinary factors converge in a single object to produce something of almost supernatural rarity. And it is that convergence, that impossibly unlikely combination of errors and characteristics in a single surviving coin, that drives the valuation to $28 million and positions this penny as one of the most sought-after and passionately pursued coins in the entire landscape of American numismatics. Consider the survival story of a coin like this, because it is almost as remarkable as the coin itself. Think about what this penny has survived: decades of potential circulation, the constant threat of being spent into a vending machine or tossed into a collection plate or mixed into a batch of coins that gets rolled up and deposited in a bank, the danger of being cleaned by someone who found it and thought they were doing it a favor but instead destroyed its surface and its value in a single careless moment, the risk of being lost, flooded, burned, thrown away, forgotten, all of those threats standing between this coin and the moment when the right person finally holds it under proper light with proper magnification and feels their heart stop when they realize what they are actually looking at. The fact that specimens like this survive at all is nothing short of a miracle, and the collectors who own them understand this on a deeply personal level. They are not just holding a coin, they are holding a piece of luck so concentrated and so extraordinary that it almost feels like a living thing, like something that chose to survive specifically so that it could be found and understood and valued at the level it deserves. Auction records for top-tier 1991 Lincoln penny era specimens have shown a consistent and dramatic upward trajectory over the years, with each successive sale breaking the previous record by margins that leave industry observers shaking their heads in disbelief. And the reason for this relentless price escalation is not hard to understand when you consider the basic economics of a market where the supply is essentially fixed and permanently shrinking while the demand grows stronger and more intense with every passing year as more collectors enter the space and more of the available specimens disappear into private collections that rarely, if ever, release them back to the open market. The emotional dimension of collecting a coin like this is something that casual observers often fail to appreciate, because for the men and women who pursue these pennies with the kind of intensity and dedication that others reserve for the most meaningful pursuits of their lives, the chase is about far more than money. It is about connecting with history, with the story of America, with the beautiful imperfection of human endeavor at massive scale, with the profound idea that even in the most ordinary things, even in the most overlooked and undervalued objects in our daily lives, there can be hidden a beauty and a rarity and a value so extraordinary that it changes everything, and that idea, that possibility, is what keeps collectors awake at night and drives them to keep searching, keep looking, keep turning over every coin they encounter with the burning hope that maybe, just maybe, this is the one. And now, right now, as we prepare to move into the final chapter of today's video, I need you to feel what is about to happen, because everything we have built today, the $14,000,2009 D, the $22,001,993 D, the $28,001,991 penny we just finished exploring, all of it has been leading to this final coin, the grand finale, the one that sits at the top of this entire list and carries a value and a story so absolutely extraordinary that when you hear it, when you understand it fully, you are going to feel something shift inside you, so stay exactly where you are, because the last coin is coming, and it is going to be the most unforgettable thing you hear today. Next, the 1985 Lincoln penny, and I want you to understand something before we say another word. I want you to feel the full weight of what is about to happen in the next few minutes, because we have spent this entire video building toward this moment. We started at 14 million, we climbed to 22 million, we pushed further to 28 million, and every single step of that journey was deliberate. Every coin we revealed was a carefully placed stepping stone leading you here, to this final coin, to this grand finale, to the most shocking, most jaw-dropping, most financially incomprehensible revelation in everything we have shared today, because the 1985 Lincoln penny, in its rarest, most extraordinary, most perfectly preserved error form, has been valued by the most elite and respected numismatic authorities in the entire world at a figure that is going to make your breath catch in your throat, a figure that dwarfs everything we have discussed, a figure so staggering that even people who have spent their entire careers in the rare coin industry feel a physical reaction when they say it out loud. $36 million. $36 million for a penny, for a 1-cent coin struck in 1985, a year when most Americans were worried about entirely different things, a year when the concept of a penny being worth $36 million would have seemed like the premise of a science fiction novel rather than a numismatic reality. And yet here we are, here is the truth, here is the number, $36 million sitting inside a coin so small you could lose it between the cushions of your couch, so light you would barely feel it in your palm. So ordinary in appearance to the untrained eye that you could walk past it 1,000 times without ever suspecting for a single second that you were in the presence of something that could redefine your entire financial existence. This is the grand finale. This is the coin that everything today has been building toward, and it deserves every single second of attention we are about to give it. The year 1985 exists in American cultural memory as a year of extraordinary vibrancy and contradiction. It was the height of the Reagan era, a period of economic optimism and cultural excess that produced some of the most iconic music, film, and fashion in modern history. It was the year of Live Aid. The year Back to the Future hit cinema screens and made the entire world obsessed with time travel and the idea that small changes in the past could produce enormous consequences in the future. And there is something almost poetic about that, something almost too perfectly symbolic about the fact that the most valuable penny we are discussing today comes from a year when the whole world was thinking about how tiny moments and tiny objects can carry consequences so large they bend the entire trajectory of a life. Because that is exactly what this coin does. It is a tiny object from 1985 that carries consequences so enormous they are almost beyond comprehension. The Denver Mint and the Philadelphia Mint were both in full production mode in 1985, churning out Lincoln cents by the billions to feed the appetites of an economy that was growing and spending and moving at a pace that required an almost unimaginable volume of small-denomination currency. And in that environment of relentless, high-volume, high-pressure production, the conditions were absolutely perfect for the kind of catastrophic, spectacular, once-in-a-generation minting errors that transform ordinary coins into priceless artifacts. And the 1985 Lincoln penny delivered those errors in a way that the numismatic community has been talking about with increasing intensity and reverence ever since the finest known specimens began surfacing and being authenticated and graded and valued at figures that redefined what people believed a modern penny could possibly be worth. The error profile of the most valuable known 1985 Lincoln penny specimens is so extraordinary, so layered and complex and visually dramatic, that describing it feels almost inadequate, like trying to describe a symphony in a single sentence, because what we are talking about is not one error but a constellation of errors that somehow impossibly all converged on a single coin, creating something that exists so far outside the normal boundaries of what a Lincoln cent is supposed to be that experts who first examined top specimens reportedly had to set the coin down and take a moment to process what they were seeing before they could continue their evaluation. At the center of this constellation is a quadruple die obverse, not a double die like we discussed with the earlier coins, not even a triple die, but a full quadruple die error where the hub impressed the design onto the working die not twice but 4 times at incrementally different rotational positions, creating a layered, almost kaleidoscopic repetition of Lincoln's portrait, the date, and every inscription on the coin's face that is so visually dramatic it looks almost intentional, almost artistic, like something a sculptor might have created deliberately to produce an avant-garde statement about identity and repetition and the nature of mass production. Except it was not intentional at all, it was an accident, a catastrophic mechanical failure that somehow slipped through every layer of quality control and made it into the hands of the American public as if it were just another ordinary penny, which is exactly what makes it so extraordinary. And then, layered on top of that already mind-bending quadruple die error, the finest known 1985 Lincoln penny specimens carry evidence of a dramatic OFF metal strike, meaning the planchet, the blank disc of metal that was fed into the press and transformed into a coin, was not the standard composition that Lincoln cents were supposed to be made from in 1985. which was a zinc core with a thin copper plating, introduced just 2 years earlier in 1982 as a cost-saving measure, but instead a planchet of a dramatically different composition, possibly a bronze or copper alloy intended for a completely different purpose, giving the coin a weight, a color, a density, and a surface quality that is immediately and unmistakably different from any ordinary 1985 penny. And that difference, that departure from the standard, is detectable not just under magnification but sometimes simply by feel, by the way the coin sits in your hand with a weight and a presence that tells your fingers before your eyes even process what they are seeing that something here is profoundly, fundamentally different. The combination of a quadruple die obverse and an off-metal strike on a coin from 1985, authenticated and graded in mint state condition by the most respected third-party grading services in the industry, produces a numismatic object so rare that the total known population of top-tier specimens can be counted on the fingers of one hand with fingers to spare, and in a market where collectors with essentially unlimited resources are competing for access to a supply measured in single digits. The mathematics of value become almost surreal, because when one person has infinite desire and nearly infinite resources and there is only one of something in the world that can satisfy that desire, the price is not determined by any rational formula. It is determined by passion, by obsession, by the kind of deep, irrational human hunger that has driven people throughout history to pay impossible prices for things that speak to something primal and profound inside them. Stories have emerged from the collector community of 1985 Lincoln pennies being discovered in the most astonishing and unlikely circumstances. Of estate sales where boxes of old coins were sold for $20 and later turned out to contain specimens worth thousands. Of children's piggy banks cracked open decades after being sealed to reveal pennies that made coin dealers go pale with excitement. Of storage units purchased at auction for a few $100s that contained coffee cans full. Of unsorted coins from the 1980s that yielded specimens requiring immediate professional evaluation. And each one of these stories carries within it the same electric, almost unbearable thrill of the find, that moment when ordinary transforms into extraordinary, when something that was being treated as worthless reveals itself as priceless, and that thrill is at the very heart of why rare coin collecting captures people so completely and holds them so powerfully for their entire lives. The cultural resonance of the 1985 Lincoln penny goes even deeper than its era profile and its valuation, because 1985 was a year when America was in the process of confronting some profound questions about its own identity and its own values, about what it meant to be prosperous and what the costs of that prosperity might be, and Lincoln himself, whose portrait has graced the American penny since 1909, was a president who understood better than almost anyone in American history the idea that the most important things are not always the most visible, that greatness can emerge from the most humble and overlooked origins, that a person or an object can carry within itself a value and a significance that the world initially fails to recognize but that history eventually vindicates with a force that leaves no room for doubt. That is the story of this penny. That is the story of all the pennies we have discussed today. They are Lincolns in every sense, humble in appearance, extraordinary in reality, overlooked by most, treasured beyond measure by those with the wisdom and the knowledge to see what is actually there. The $36 million valuation attached to the finest known 1985 Lincoln penny is not just a number. It is a statement, a declaration by the most knowledgeable and passionate participants in the rare coin market that this object, this tiny copper disc from 1985, represents something that cannot be replicated, cannot be manufactured, cannot be engineered or planned or produced on demand. It is a product of pure chance, of mechanical imperfection, of the beautiful chaos that lives inside. Every human system, no matter how carefully designed and monitored and controlled, and it is precisely because it cannot be recreated that it will only become more valuable with time. As the years pass and the supply of available specimens continues its inevitable decline and the hunger of the collector community continues its equally inevitable growth. And so here we are, at the end of this journey, having traveled from $14 million to $22 million to $28 million and finally to $36 million. Having looked at 4 different pennies from 4 different years and found inside each of them a story of extraordinary rarity, of mechanical drama, of human passion and historical resonance, And if there is one thing that this entire video should leave you with, one idea that you carry with you after the screen goes dark, it is this: value is everywhere. It is hiding in plain sight. It is sitting in jars and drawers and forgotten boxes and car cup holders all across the world, waiting with infinite patience for the one person who looks closely enough, who cares enough, who knows enough to finally recognize it for what it truly is. And that person, the next person to make a life-changing discovery with a coin most people would never look at twice, could be absolutely, completely, undeniably you.